Welcome back to now episode three. Is that what we're on? I can't keep track because we're just pumping out so much content. Episode three of the Balls Deep Cinema
Yeah.
podcast. Brandon Cortez, Stephen Ranju joining me. I am Jay Shatara. We have two episodes of Ahsoka to catch up on. A lot of good content these past couple of weeks. So let's just jump right in it. We'll start with episode four, or excuse me, five. So we did a recap of episodes one through four. If you haven't checked out that episode, go check it out. But we'll talk about episode five, which was about a week ago now. And I mean, in my opinion, some of the best Star Wars that we've gotten since Disney took over. And I say Star Wars. I think Andor was a really good show, but I think it's more of a spy crime drama thriller. This felt like Star Wars all over again. Obviously, a big spoiler warning ahead, so this is your chance to go. I mean, we know how episode four ended, the big reveal that Hayden Christensen came back in the World Between Worlds. And then now this was building upon that. I kind of love how the episode opens up. It's about like 10 minutes of like really kind of teasing you. Like, when are we going to? We all know what we came for, Anakin and Ahsoka's reunion.
Yeah.
And here we are, just Hera talking to Carson and her son and Chopper. And we're like, yo, just get to it already. So I kind of like that anticipation, that build up. I like seeing Jason's force abilities. As a Rebels fan, you only got about 30 seconds of Jason Syndulla in the final episode, so kind of fun seeing him in live action and seeing his force abilities like his father. But the big thing here is Ahsoka and Anakin in the World Between Worlds. I love how they kind of just jump into the action. It's like a little bit of dialogue and then boom, lightsaber fight. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I thought it overall was one of the best Star Wars pieces of content since Disney took over this whole franchise back in 2012.
Yeah. Great intro there, Jay. I know we mentioned a little bit briefly last episode. All three of us said that the Star Wars fandom hasn't been respected in a while. And I think we saw that a lot with the sequel trilogy, where it was a lot of fan service without being completed or kind of being rewarded. Um, I think just this flashback alone, and we've talked about how much Dave Filoni really cares and wants to do his best with his new, Disney Plus, I guess, series. But you see that more with Ahsoka than you did see with Mandalorian season 3 and Book of Boba Fett. Um, I was just wowed the entire time. I think seeing the love letter to Clone Wars being brought to life, seeing Anakin with the haircuts, or young Ahsoka, and just these scenes, what really feels like, you know a, that the kind of little therapy session, or almost like last bit of training, like with Anakin, or whatever Anakin is, said to Ahsoka. I don't know, it was just looking at it the entire time. It wasn't even anything I was thinking about as one a screenwriter or a film critic would look at. I was just enjoying it. I was just in the moment, kind of just letting it come to me, just me as a viewer, me as a fan, just watching that come occur. I agree. I think it was really beautiful. Just really, it took its time with it. Didn't feel too forced. But yeah, I do agree that it is some of the best thing we've ever seen for Star Wars, even if it lasted maybe a total of 15, 20 or so minutes.
Yeah, no, I thought episode five. I thought it was probably one of the better episodes. We're six episodes in. I think it would rank in my top three so far. Yeah, I mean, it was great to see Hayden Christensen. I just really loved that sequence of Ahsoka falling, from the bridge, and she's just back into her young self, and we're thrown into the Clone Wars, right? In the midst of the Clone Wars, and as someone who did not see the Clone Wars series, but I did watch the Clone Wars movie in theaters back in the day. A very much younger Steve. It was cool to see how faithful they were to, you know, making Anakin look what he looked like during the Clone Wars. Um, it was really a cinematic experience. I thought it was really kind of breathtaking to see the stormtroopers just running through the mist, and we start to see we're just thrown into what was a conflict and Anakin leading the battle. So right then and there, I knew this was a great moment that not only kind of exude fan service, because obviously as you mentioned, a love letter to Clone Wars, but at the same time, uh, I thought it was just a great way to reintroduce Hayden Christensen, reintroduce Anakin as a character. I guess it was more so his function of being there was to let Ahsoka know that she wants to live. I was wondering if we would get more explanations on where she was. I don't know if I really kind of understood that. If you guys had any kind of, I guess, interpretations of where Ahsoka went to, was she on the brink of death? You know, or was she in a different dimension? What was I looking at?
No, that's a great question. And kind of before we possibly answer that, I thought Hayden Christensen's performance was phenomenal. I think as an actor, I don't know. I just saw a lot more of it than we saw in Revenge of the Sith. And it's just that's something that I do want to highlight. His performance was just really, really good. You can see how much he cared for that rebuild. Jay, you talked about it last week, how he went from, I think, fans loving just that performance or his, just him being in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, to just years later it building up. I think you almost saw that emotion in the actor himself, and that's something that I did want to highlight before we answer your question about what it was that we were seeing.
Yeah, I actually did want to point out Hayden's performance too. You could tell, even just like as a human being, he has grown so much as an actor. He did some movies after Revenge of the Sith. You could tell he was kind of like they were trying to make him the next big Hollywood star. Jumper was his big flop, and we never really saw him after again.
Yeah.
I thought he was phenomenal this episode. I think it's a great point you put, Brandon, is that he cares so much about the character. We saw him doing all the press tours for Obi-Wan, and you could just tell the fans received him so well. To answer Steve's question, she was in the world between worlds, but there's a lot of interpretation out there. Was she dead? Was she on the brink of death? What was the point of this? And I think my interpretation, and maybe many people's interpretation, was Ahsoka has a lot of guilt. She left Anakin in the Jedi Order, and shortly after that, he became Darth Vader. And you see it in Rebels when she fights Darth Vader again. She has to confront that because she has to realize, she has to come to terms with the truth, and the truth hurts. That's a saying, the truth hurts. She has to come to realization that Darth Vader, this monster, this guy who has killed billions of people with the Death Star, or not at that point yet, but will eventually. He's wielding the Youngling Slayer 3000 on his belt. Like this guy absolutely is a monster now. And the guy who was once so caring, loved his girl more than anything, and would eventually love his kids, never really kind of came to be. He turned into an absolute monster, and in a literal and figurative sense, because look what he also has become. He's become an actual robotic mechanic monster, doesn't have limbs anymore, needs a breathing apparatus. So she has a lot of guilt for that. She feels like if she was there during Order 66, she could have turned him, or whatever it may be. And my interpretation is, as she was about to die, she has similar guilt for Sabine. She tried training Sabine, and Sabine, it didn't work out. We haven't really seen that yet in episode 5 or 6, why it didn't really work out. But she has that guilt, and she has guilt as a master and an apprentice, because her master became something dark, and maybe her apprentice is on a similar path. We don't know yet. So, I interpret it as she's really struggling with that, and her on the brink of death in the world between worlds. Anakin's trying to tell her it's not your fault. What was going to happen was going to happen. I saw a good tweet. Basically, Ahsoka has a lot of trauma, but they just don't have mental health services in the Star Wars universe. She was a child warrior, if you think about it. She was, I think, George Lucas always said she was like 13 or something like that when she first was introduced to us as a fan base. And she is in the middle of a all-out war as a teenager. So, she experienced a lot of trauma, and this was her way of sort of getting that guilt of Anakin off her chest, and maybe dealing with some of that to become a better master. And it's kind of weird. I don't know if you've noticed this. The first 4 episodes, she doesn't smile much. She's very stoic. These next 2 episodes, she's cracking jokes with Hugh Yang, and she's just very she's a little more upbeat, but still kind of that stoic personality. So clearly this worked. To answer this question, she is in the world between worlds, which is a bunch of portals where past, present, and future meets. But I don't know if we're going to see the world between worlds again. We might get into that when we talk about episode 5. I do have a theory. Don't want to spoil it just yet. But I do think it's a place where I don't know if that was actually Anakin. I don't know if that was a Force ghost. I don't know if that was just an aberration from her mind. But she got over that guilt of Anakin's turn, and I absolutely loved it. And it was a love letter to Clone Wars fans.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point with Ahsoka being very serious. It almost reminded me a little bit of Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, where it's like, we saw, preppy kid, pretty happy kid in the first two movies. But in so many years when he's gotten older and more mature, I don't know if it's just a Jedi thing, but it seems to be you get a little bit more serious, you're blunt, you're very straightforward. We see a very, very mature, blunt Luke in Return of the Jedi, and I don't know if that's how I kind of felt with Ahsoka too. You are right, she does have a little bit of that smirk, but she's very straightforward. I feel like we don't see much of the kid. I don't know if that's maturity or a little bit, but you are right, maybe hopefully we do see some of that, kind of a little bit of the kid in her from the Clone Wars, but and obviously a much older mature personality that is Ahsoka.
Yeah, no, I would love to see. When I was watching, I was thinking if they did like a Clone Wars movie, like a live action one, not
Yeah.
the animated one. I think it would be probably one of the better kind of storylines or
Mhm.
amalgamation of storylines you could adapt for a Star Wars movie.
Mhm.
Because the excerpt that I saw in Episode 5, that was probably the most interesting stuff in the show for me, to see the
Mhm.
stormtroopers, to see a
Hmm.
young Anakin, to see a young
Yeah.
Ahsoka even.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and I'm curious, did Hayden Christensen's a great actor.
Mhm.
I felt like I was watching like Keanu Reeves for a second when I saw the actor. And that's no slight on Hayden. That's no slight
No.
on Hayden,
Yeah.
but I felt like it was similar to how Keanu Reeves interprets John Wick. But
Yeah. Yeah.
what I will say is, did you guys feel like Hayden was pulling his performance from was this Anakin Skywalker, did it embody the performance that we saw from Hayden in the prequel trilogy, or was it more of the Anakin Skywalker we saw in the Clone Wars and in the animated content, in terms of how the perform not the performance, but the way Anakin was portrayed in terms of how he interacted with Ahsoka, and then a little bit of him, obviously when he turned into pre Darth Vader Anakin, that was very much pulled from the
Yeah.
prequel, but
Mhm.
from the prequel movies, specifically Revenge of the Sith. But in terms of the younger Anakin, with the Clone Wars specific
Yeah.
background, was that pulling from? Was that the same character y'all saw in the Clone Wars, or was that classic Hayden Christensen performance?
I think it pulls from three parts here, and
Mhm.
the first part we see is Anakin from the Clone Wars TV show. He's snarky, he's cocky.
Yeah.
Him and Ahsoka are actually the reason I think they work so well together in the cartoon is because they're kind of the same. They don't listen, they don't take directions well. They kind of go on their own path most times. Ahsoka more than others, and it leads to some really disappointing results. But they have really good banter, and you see it right away. He goes, "Oh, you got old." Or she says you
Mhm.
look the same, and he says you got old. Like that's just their banter.
Yeah.
That was really good. The
Yeah.
second part of it is I think he was pulling some of that Revenge of the Sith, especially when you get to the Siege of Mandalore. The Siege of Mandalore is happening at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. So he's kind of pulling that. He's got the longer haircut, the same exact dark robes. I want to say his Clone Wars look in live action was badass. The armor, the Clone Wars armor
Yeah.
was so cool. And then I think the third part is Hayden Christensen when you see him as Darth Vader, but like not the Darth Vader we know. We know Darth Vader as the robot who breathes really heavily. And at the end of Return of the Jedi, you see his face for the first time. That Darth Vader we saw in this episode was the Darth Vader that Obi-Wan Kenobi robbed us up. I'm just going to throw it out there. Obi-Wan, I now hate you because we would have saw a completely more powerful and I mean, when he had that red lightsaber in his hand, that's what like Palpatine probably envisioned when he was trying to recruit Anakin as his apprentice because he was just overpowered. And I thought that was really good by Hayden Christensen to show that like when he was like, you lack conviction. And they did the really good voice mixing with James Earl Jones' voice. So I thought it was kind of like three parts. You got the kind of beginning, that Clone Wars, then that Revenge of the Sith Anakin. Then you just got Hayden Christensen, kind of his own take
Mhm.
and we did kind of see it in Obi-Wan Kenobi in his final fight with Obi-Wan.
Mhm.
You only see a part of his face, but you can kind of see the emotion through that mask. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. I would have answered that question the same way, Jay. I think Clone Wars, like little flashback scene, definitely Revenge of the Sith, very much that very beginning. Definitely just kind of Hayden Christensen. I think when he first sees Ahsoka, uh, it's the way I see it is more of that's the spirit from Return of the Jedi, like at the very end of that movie. Like that's him living that sort of almost peaceful life, but being able to still train, use some of his powers that he still does. That's the type of Anakin I saw, like in the bridge moment. Like not the flashbacks, but the bridge. I definitely saw that a little bit. But you are right. I really, if there's one thing that I really wish could have happened was seeing Anakin more as Anakin, and not a robot, and as Darth Vader. Just when he first kills Mace Windu, and what Palpatine sees him when he's going on his killing spree. Those red eyes, the orange eye. That's
Mhm.
something I wish we saw a lot of, and I'm happy we were able to see what maybe could be one last time. But yeah, that was a lot of mix of a lot of things, Steven. I think that's a good way that Jay answered it.
Yeah, now I'm wondering, with that episode,
Yeah.
like where are we progressing to? And obviously with episode 6, we can just get right into it. With episode 6,
Yep.
we see a lot of Sabine, we see a lot of Balin, of Shin,
Mhm.
but we also see Admiral Thrawn,
Oh
played by
yeah.
Lars Mikkelsen.
Yep.
Um, we had a great conversation before the show about Admiral Thrawn's history, dating back only to the 90s,
Yep.
pre-Disney, classic Lucasfilm Admiral
Yep.
Thrawn. And, I'm not familiar with the character, to be quite honest.
Mhm.
All my exposure to Admiral Thrawn was just Jay telling me, hey, Thrawn's coming. and not to mention, I'm a fan of Lars Mikkelsen as an actor. Great on
Mhm.
House
Yep.
of Cards.
Oh, definitely. Yep.
Yep, great family, the Mickelson family.
Oh yeah.
But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just curious. A lot of episode 5 was, I think, just kind of the flashback, and we do see a little bit of Hera's child. I guess I feel like that's kind of Disney saying like, "Hey, watch out, this guy could be a Jedi one day."
Yep.
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
most of
Yep.
it was the flashback. As far as how the story progresses, I think in episode 6 we really start to see, I guess
Mhm.
the wheel spinning, because we see Thrawn finally arrive.
Yep.
We see a little bit of the witches. And Jay, you can. Who are the witches again? They're the
Yeah.
The Night
Sisterhood
Sisters.
of. Go ahead.
The
Sorry.
the night, not the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. The Night Sisters. Yeah. A little
No, not
backstory.
the
The Night
Macbeth.
Sister. Yeah, yeah, not the three witches from Macbeth, which actually probably there probably was a lot of symbolism in that. I
A
mean, I
lot of
wouldn't be
inspiration. I can
surprised.
totally. That's
Yeah.
first thought that came to my
Uh,
mind.
but
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I was gonna
uh,
say, just to go off that Shakespeare symbolism. Just a few things. I'll hand it off to you,
Yeah.
Jay. I'm curious about
Yep.
the witch's role. Whether their story expands a little bit, because I would be curious to learn about their lore, their background. I'm not sure they'll get into it in this show, but it's definitely
Uh-huh.
something that's curious as a side character. Um, and as far as the Macbeth elements of it, just speaking on
Uh-huh.
Shakespeare, I thought Ray Stevenson's given the best performance of the show. I
Mhm.
thought his
mhm.
performance was pristine this last episode. His talk with Shin about just the endless cycles of him looking back in the days when he was a part of the Order, and just him speaking about how everything's just an endless cycle where it's just all expected to happen in his mind, and he's trying to break the cycle. I think we learn a lot about his motivations as a character. Previously on the last episode, I thought I thought he was just not a good guy, but I think in this episode we really see him as almost a tired soul in a way, almost tired of the world, almost tired of the endless cycle of violence, of imperialism in the Star Wars universe, and so I think Ray Stevenson's given the best performance by far. I'm almost shocked to see how good he is in this show. Not because I know how good he is as he was as an actor, but the way he's really embodying the character of Balin and what Balin's motivations are, how I guess just physically and mentally he views the world of Star Wars and the galaxy and just what he's trying to get out of it. I was blown away by his performance, but yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, like what is, I guess, how's the story going to keep progressing? What are we going to get into? Because I know Thrawn's here, but I guess what's the stakes now? What is really the end game? I know you guys seeing Rebels and the
Mhm.
animated series
Mhm.
have a better idea of what Thrawn's capabilities are. I'm just curious, now that we got the Hayden Christensen part out of it, now Thrawn's here. We got the cameos from the previous IP, from the previous series and the movies.
Yeah.
I'm curious now, what's the end goal? What are we heading to in your guys' opinion?
So I do want to say one thing, and I have a theory about what Balin's up to. We'll get to that after we do our first break. But I will say this: Thrawn, his objective from Rebels all the way to now, his objective is always to know his enemy better than the enemy knows themselves. And the reason I think that the Hayden Christensen, yes, it was good for Ahsoka to kind of get over that guilt, things like that. I want to say this though. He says when Morgan Elsbeth tells him that, or that the Night Sisters, excuse me, tell him that Ahsoka is on the way. He tells Morgan Elsbeth, "I need to know everything about her. I need to know who her master was, who trained her, this, and that." Right? He's saying that for a few reasons, and this just goes into the mind of the tactician that Thrawn is. This is why he's my second favorite villain in any media, probably after Darth Vader, because where he might lack, and he's actually a really skilled fighter. You find that out in Rebels. He's a very good fighter, but where he might not have the Force, for instance, he's not a Sith. He's such a good tactician. He's going to use Ahsoka's guilt against her. He's going to find out that Anakin was her master, and when they fight and when they meet up, he is going to use that against her. I guarantee it, because he wants to get in your head. That's how he beats you. He will get in your head. When he goes up against the rebels in the rebels, one of the last few episodes in one of their final battles. Spoiler alert: Kanan Jarrus, Hera's lover, boyfriend, whatever you want to call him, and Jason's dad ends up dying. He's the Jedi that trains Ezra. He uses Hera's family history like against her. She has a relic. It's called the Kalikori. It's this whole thing that they do a whole arc in Rebels on, and he steals it from her, and like he just knows how to get in the enemy's head. So when he said that, I think that's actually going to help add even more context to the Hayden Christensen stuff, where you think she got over her guilt of him turning into Darth Vader. I think Thrawn is actually going to use that against her, and I think he's going to really try to get in her head. I can't wait for those two to meet because they're so different, but they're also so the same. They have the same personality. They're calm, they're cool, they're good under pressure, they're hard to beat. Thrawn was a two-season villain, and he was very hard to beat in Rebels. And it took Ezra using the Force to get the Purrgil just to get him out of the galaxy. I mean, he's that good. And a quick history on the Night Sisters. They're from Dathomir, same planet as Darth Maul. They actually saved Darth Maul. A funny story. George Lucas goes to Dave Filoni and says, "Hey, make Darth Maul a villain in Clone Wars." Dave Filoni tells George, "Hey, I can't do that. You killed him in Phantom Menace." And he goes, "Just figure it out." So he actually introduces Darth Maul's brother, Savage Opress, who becomes Count Dooku's apprentice. And then the next season, George goes, "Just find a way to bring Darth Maul back." So they introduced the Night Sisters. I mean, we got the Night Sisters because George Lucas just really wanted Darth Maul back, and they used their magic to bring Darth Maul back. So that's kind of they end up getting massacred by General Grievous. So that's what ends up happening, and that's why the Night Sisters are kind of in the series now.
There's
When did that
that's a lot of
happen?
little history.
When did that happen, Jay? When did General Grievous massacre them?
That was like season 5 or 6 of Clone Wars.
Wow. Okay. And what happened to Darth Maul?
So he actually dies in Rebels.
Damn, I got a lot to catch up on. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, Steve, kind of going back to your point of where we go next, right? I think episode 1 through 4, it's mission get to Ezra, right? But also at the same time, mission B is stop them from bringing back Thrawn. Now that episode 5 and 6 achieved of getting to Thrawn and Sabine reaching Ezra, now we're kind of a little bit of a crossroads at like we still assume that Ahsoka is gonna still try to find Sabine back. But when she does in these final 2 episodes, 7 and 8, I think that's where we expect the big battles to happen. It really feels interesting because it took us a little while to get to 5 total episodes until 6 to get to Thrawn and Ezra. So it's very interesting where we're gonna go with this. And Jay, I know we mentioned this a little bit. And Steve, I don't know how you felt, but it it felt a little bit. I felt like if my best friend disappeared for so many years and I never saw him or her or whoever, I feel like I would run up to that person and hug that person. I just didn't feel like a big fan of just a little quick chat and then just a little quick hug. I don't know about you guys, but that felt for me like I felt like there should have been a lot more emotion between the actors or what was written for that or the direction. Um, that's something that I felt was a little bit lackluster. So my fear is that that relationship or between the two actors won't be its best. Maybe that's just me overthinking it, but as well as with Thrawn, I mean, the music score was really good. You know, as the ship's coming down, as we see as we coming in, it's and I think that his introduction is pretty good. It's very slow, straight to the point. He's walking down. Um, but there's something about the whole Ezra part that's and I love the actor. I think the moment I saw him, I immediately think this is good. This is a guy who's so much older. He's been a couple of years as a nomad. He's been on his own, just surviving. Uh, but it was a little bit of that introduction that kind of bothered me a little bit. I don't know how you two felt about that.
I don't know what to feel because I'm not familiar with Ezra. So honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
Sabine cares about Ezra.
Mhm.
You know, they have a past. Jay, you'd probably be better to kind of dive into your thoughts on the whole Ezra and Sabine interaction.
No, I definitely thought it was underwhelming. As Brandon said, you would think if I hadn't seen my friend for so many years, or even presumed dead, because the way they ended Rebels was very. I mean, for the time at that point, I think only the Last Jedi was out. They were getting ready to release Rise of Skywalker, so for that to come out, I mean, a lot of people were wondering where the hell did Ezra go? Where the hell did Thrawn go? Especially because this all happens before A New Hope. I get it; these characters are out there and the original trilogy throws everything off because you don't see these characters in the main fight. One good thing they really did is Rogue One came out in the middle of Rebels, and you see the Ghost, the iconic Ghost ship that Hera flies. It's in that final battle. You see it like in the side. So they do a good. You see Chopper; he makes a good cameo in the Rebel base. So they do a good job of incorporating these things in new movies. But you're kind of like, okay, they weren't there in the main fight. So I just I really think it was underwhelming. I think there could have been a lot more emotion. They haven't seen each other in a long time. I kind of hope when him and Ahsoka reunite, it's a little bit better because they did have a relationship themselves in terms of a friendship. So I hope that's what we kind of see. Hey, we're gonna take a quick break. When we get back, we have a theory for you, and we'll kind of finish our breakdown and what we kind of hope to see for the final 2 episodes, or yeah, final 2 episodes. I can't believe we're already at the end of this. All right, we'll be right back.
Perfect. So I guess my question being, if she was in the world between worlds, then she probably teleported into a past moment in her life where she was
Mhm.
actually within it, or simply a flashback. And I bring that up because the way Balin, how he's a almost obsessed with the idea of going back to the beginning, um, familiar with Anakin, but you really don't know how. You know what could be the reason. I'm wondering if he's possibly like he's been to the world between worlds, or he's maybe a time traveler. I don't know what you think about that, Jay Brandon.
I think there's a sneaky line in there. I think Balin actually fought in the Clone Wars and was part of the Jedi Order. There's a sneaky line in there when they meet Thrawn for the first time, and he looks at Balin. He says he wasn't part of the plan, and Morgan Elsbeth goes, "Oh, he used to be a Jedi." He goes, "Oh, so General Balin Skull." The reason he
Mhm.
called him General Balin Skull is because in the Clone Wars, Jedi's were generals
Yeah.
and Grand Admiral Thrawn, who wasn't a Grand Admiral at that point, fought with these Jedi side by side and knew like everything about them. The reason he was able to deduct that Vader was Anakin is actually he studied Anakin's fighting style so much that when he saw Vader fight, he saw him use the same fighting style. So the reason he called it, I genuinely think Baylan Skoll fought in the Clone Wars. And then there's another line later when he's talking with Shin Hati, his apprentice. He
Mhm.
she asks him about what it was like to be in the Jedi Order, or
Mhm.
did you love it? And he said, I loved the idea of it, but
Mhm.
you don't know what it's like to see your world burn. I think he's actually talking about the Jedi Temple. If you remember in Order 66, in Revenge of the Sith, that scene where Anakin's climbing the steps with the clones, it's burning. The temple's literally burning.
Yeah.
I think he was there on Order 66. I'm wondering if he was one of the Jedi to escape, similar to the Inquisitor from Obi-Wan. I'm forgetting her name.
That's right.
She was there as a youngling, but Balin's clearly much older. I think he was maybe around the same age or a little older than Obi-Wan. And he probably fought with Anakin, and he even mentioned a line, Anakin spoke so highly of you when he said that to Ahsoka. So that means he's probably even interacted with Anakin. So
Yeah.
I think he's part of the Clone Wars. Now, one thing about Baylan, they've really established with this character, he's really smart and he knows the Jedi archives really, really well. So my thought is he studied the Jedi archives, and the Jedi archives. Just imagine like the Library of Congress, but for the Force.
Yeah.
Endless knowledge. He probably read about the world between worlds there, and he's just aware of it. And he probably knows something that we as the viewer don't know yet, which is that maybe the world between worlds is actually on this planet. This is clearly a Force planet. The Purgle, the space whales go there to end their journey. He said it was a graveyard. You saw the bones. Clearly, there's something special about this planet, and he knows something about it.
No, that's really good to bring up. I am somehow getting I'm going to betray everyone type of vibes and really do my own thing. That's something I can definitely see this
Mhm.
character Balin doing at some point, whatever that ends up being like.
I
Well,
mean,
I
one thing.
wonder if I wonder if her apprentice is gonna betray him. I feel like maybe that's
Yeah,
coming
Yeah, the power,
I'm
yeah.
getting some vibes from her that she's
Yeah.
not really. Her vibes are a
because
little off. I'm not
they
gonna
don't
lie.
they don't seem that
Yeah.
close for
They
someone that's
yeah.
her Padawan or his Padawan, right? It doesn't seem
Yeah.
like she knows a lot about him,
Yeah.
which might
Someone's
be
aware. Yeah.
purposeful.
That's true. Someone is a werewolf here, so
And the thing about it is, I wonder why, if he doesn't really care about bringing the Empire back. Morgan Elsbeth has one goal, and if you saw the Mandalorian season finale with Giancarlo Esposito, when he's in the Shadow Council, they all say Grand Admiral Thrawn is returning to bring the Empire back. Morgan Elsbeth wants to bring the Empire back. Balin doesn't really care about that. So why would he go on this journey if he was hired as a mercenary to save Morgan Elsbeth in the very first episode? Why was he hired to do that, but then stick along with them? I think he has ulterior motives. He saw Morgan building this giant hyperspace ring to take them to a completely different galaxy. And I think he has an ulterior motive. I think he wanted to be on that ship for a reason. I don't think he cares about bringing the Empire back. He really wants something that's on a Peridia, is the planet they're on. So I don't know. Maybe he knows of a portal to get to the world between worlds. Maybe he knows of an ancient Jedi temple. What I love about this new galaxy, there's actually a lot of untapped potential. There's video games that are no longer considered canon, where a lot of characters from these video games come from a different galaxy, and there's theories
yeah.
that they're going to bring a lot of these characters back. That's what I really love about this new galaxy. There's a lot of untapped potential that they can do with it.
Yeah, I'm just curious. We have only 2 more episodes left. Would love to see a little more about Thrawn, what he's been up to, what's he been doing. Obviously Ezra as well. Whatever happens with Sabine, I think it's a little predictable what's going to happen. Kind of her character. I've seen it a lot of times. The eager apprentice, well, Padawan in this case, and I think she'll prove her worth to Ahsoka. Um, but yeah, I'm going into these last 2 episodes with an open book. Don't really
Yeah.
have a good compass on where it's really going.
Yeah.
It seems like Thrawn is a character that's going to be the big bad of the whole Filoniverse, if
Yeah,
that's accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this really might be the way to introduce Thrawn, to obviously set him up for the big movie. But does that mean we see Shin or Balin or Morgan Elsbeth and the witches? Maybe they end up being the more focused bad guy these last 2 episodes with Thrawn obviously
Right.
being the major game for future events.
That really could be a good thing, is that we see the finale of these kind of like pre-set up villains, the B villains, and see the A villain that is Thrawn being set up more. I don't know. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I'm getting a little bit of Jesus Christ in Ezra's character, where he's very much this very peaceful guy living among those people. And I don't know, I can see him somehow getting a little bit of a change of heart, being like, you know what, this is my home. I care for these turtles. Um, maybe I want to stay with them and care for them. And whenever they might get hunted down by because we saw Balin and we saw him and his apprentice get followed by some kind of locals, and that was just a little bit of hints. So I don't know if there's even some like more side villains, maybe a little bit of a Knights of Ren type of crew here with those that we saw. I mean, we didn't even get a lot of that, so I can even see those characters.
There is a theory
Yeah.
out there. Don't forget, Sabine's last name is Ren. So there is a theory
Yeah.
out there that maybe one day she'll be, or maybe her brother. She does have a brother in the series. Maybe
Yeah.
that's how the Knights of Ren starts. Even though they're the biggest disappointment in the sequels, we never get to
I oh
find
no,
out anything about them.
what's funny is that when you hear Phantom Menace, you think that is the villain, or maybe that is Darth Maul. I just really wish one of the sequel movies were Star Wars, The Knights of Ren, and them being the main focus. I think it would have been incredibly badass to see them getting eliminated one by one by the heroes. I mean, just one movie. I think that's one of the biggest wish lists that just never happened that I wish did.
Maybe for the eventual Star Wars What If show, if that ever happens.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, I do want to hop into a non-Star Wars related topic. This is our little surprise, something that we've all. It's just it's.
I mean, we gotta cover everything, Jay.
It's a movie.
Man.
I just want to say, I want to preface. It's a movie I'm excited for, and I know Steve's excited for.
Yeah.
Brandon, I know you didn't even see the first one. There was a trailer that dropped this week for Aquaman 2 and the Lost Kingdom, I think is the name of it.
I think it's Aquaman
and the Lost Kingdom. Yep.
Yeah. So no Aquaman 2. Gotta make sure we get the name right. We don't want James Gunn coming after us. James Wan is directing it, and I'm a big James Wan fan. I just want to say I love like everything he puts out. Obviously, *Malignant*, which was on HBO a few years ago, a great horror thriller. *Conjuring*, *Conjuring 2*, *Insidious*. My personal favorite, *Furious 7*. I can't wait till that podcast. And Saw, of course, So obviously a very good director, esteemed director. Brandon, I know you didn't see it, but me and Steve did, and I love the first Aquaman. I thought it was, a breath of fresh air and a very dark take on the DC extended universe. Every movie to that point was like so dark for no reason, and then you get Aquaman. It's visual, it's funny. There's a really bad rendition of Africa by Pitbull in it, and I think it really doesn't even fit in the movie, but it's hilarious, and it's because they go to Africa. So I think Aquaman was one of those movies that will, like, in a few years, a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, that wasn't that bad. But let's talk about the trailer for the second one. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Okay. Did you guys watch the Justice League animation show, like animated show back on like Cartoon Network? There's this one really dark episode where I think it's Aquaman who's lost his arm, and then this one bad guy, I forgot who it was, but he's trying to like kill the baby, and then all he's doing is Aquaman, he's protecting his wife and the baby in this animated show. And I don't even think the main like Justice League characters are like really in it. I think it's more of a solo episode. I remember as a little kid just kind of being like, oh my God, this is very dark. They're going to try to kill the baby, at times. And we see a weekend Aquaman. I feel like we might see a little bit of that. I think we might see a little bit. That's the immediate first thought that went to my head, because I remember that episode as a little kid from the Justice League. And I think they might head into that a little bit, where the Black Manta, there's a part in the trailer where he says, I'm going to hurt everyone, your family, your friends. And I think that's where it's going to head towards just seeing a maybe bloody violent ending to to Black Manta. I don't know, that's just my little prediction, but colorful, visual, I love all of that. I think it's definitely something that they can really take to with the world building, that I think they can really do well in this movie, just as it did in the first movie.
Yeah, I saw the trailer, and I do want to say I liked the first Aquaman. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was fantastic, but I thought it was good. Um, in comparison to some of the other DC, films that came out, I mean, I liked it better than Suicide Squad. The was it David Ayer one? The David Ayer one was not a
Oh
fan of
gosh,
that.
yeah.
Not a fan. I don't want to relitigate
Yeah.
the DCEU, but I thought it was one of the better DCEU movies, up there with the Suicide Squad, up there with, man, really not a lot of great
Up
ones.
there with and it just
The list of ends. Yeah, DCE is
Maybe
rough.
maybe
yeah.
include Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition, but I can't talk up the theatrical cut. But
Oh man. Yeah.
that movie has its problems too. But as far as the
Yep.
trailer goes, look, I thought it looked like a great time.
That's really
The
it.
thing I do
Yep.
like about the DCEU movies, the ones that work, that have worked, um, the one thing I do like is the fact that they get directors from the horror genre, and they
Mhm.
take a stab at the comic book movies, and for the most part, I think they do a pretty good job. The
Yep.
first Shazam movie was directed by David F. Sandberg, kind of a
Mhm.
classic horror, not a classic horror director, but for the most part was that's all he directed was horror movies. The first Shazam, pretty good movie, not bad, right?
Yeah.
And it obviously did well for DC. It made money. Shazam 2, it really did not move the needle, but I don't really put that on the director. I still think he directed a fine movie. Um, Andy Muschietti for The Flash, Andy Muschietti obviously from the It series, and
Mhm.
of course James Wan, who's really, in our generation, a pretty accomplished horror director who's directed a
Mhm.
bunch of classic horror movies that, from the 2000s, 2010s that really stick for a lot of people. So I like how the DC universe does this. They bring in the horror directors who, I think, infuse a good formula, that for the most part work, or at least for some of the films. And with this trailer, what they did with the first Aquaman, they really wanted to make it almost like an Indiana Jones experience where, we have this objective. We're going to take you through this swashbuckling adventure.
Mhm.
We're going to take you to different set pieces. We're going to get you literally in the ocean. You're going to see a beautiful, underwater Atlantis. You're going to see big fight scenes, and the biggest thing is you're going to have um, a charismatic lead. And that's the one thing the Flash was missing. It had a
Mhm.
lot of things. I like the director. I like Andy Muschietti. I liked a lot of the cast: Keaton, Affleck, Josh Calais as Supergirl. But the one thing he was missing was the lead, because Ezra Miller
Yeah.
really did not work as Barry Allen in the Flash, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
And especially with the responsibility put on the shoulders of Ezra Miller in that movie. But that's the opposite with Aquaman, because who doesn't like Jason Momoa? I mean, Jason Momoa is one of the more charismatic, one of the more, I'd say, beloved actors of our generation. He's whatever film he's in. The films tend to do really well,
Mhm.
and overall, it's just nice to see him in the movie because he's always brings a good time. He brings a great energy.
Yeah.
And in this trailer, I saw nothing different from what I've seen from a lot of what Jason Momoa does. So, it's got a great cast. Love Patrick Wilson. Love Yahya
Mhm.
Abdul Mateen, Nicole Kidman, of course, Tamira Morrison as well. It's got a lot of things going for it, and I guess my biggest question after watching this is, or I guess going into it as well, is will this give a satisfying ending to the DCEU as we know it? Because obviously James Gunn coming in, about to take over
Yeah.
the reins, and I think it looks like a good time. And I'm just wondering, can this movie? I want to get your thoughts. Can this movie really save the, I guess, lasting kind of appeal or the lasting sensation that we got from the Snyderverse slash, the last couple, you know, entries in the DCEU?
And I meant to ask this just kind of a little bit more for clarification, but is this the final part or pre James Gunn movie because it was already in production? Is this what's kind of wrapping up the
So
last
I would,
series or
I, I would consider, based on my interpretation, that
mm.
the James Gunn movies have not started yet.
Well, Blue
And
Beetle is technically
Blue
going to be the
Beetle. Yeah, I thought.
first.
Yeah.
well, the way he described it was it's the first character, but it's not a part of his chain of movies.
Okay.
So
Okay,
the
interesting.
character will be included in James Gunn's universe.
Mhm.
Hopefully, we'll see, because
Right.
Blue Beetle didn't do that great box office wise, but
Yeah.
the movie was good enough to where I think James Gunn will include it into
Yeah.
the grander scheme of his Gunn universe.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, you could consider Blue Beetle a part of the Gunn run, but this, the Flash, Shazam 2, Aquaman is really just the last temptation of the
Yeah.
Snyderverse and the remnants of it, because you still have all the classic actors that I think Zack Snyder did a great job picking out. Love
Yeah.
Jason Momoa.
Mhm.
Did not like Ezra Miller as the Flash.
No.
But to answer your question, Brandon,
Yeah.
this will be the last, remnants of the DCEU as we know
I
it.
see.
And
Okay. I see.
James
Yeah.
Gunn, when he comes out with his Superman Legacy movie, that will be the start
Mhm.
of his official
I see.
DCU.
And that's a good way to start. And speaking of the casting a little bit, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Amber Heard appeared for one little second.
1 second.
And
Yeah.
it reminded me of West Side Story when it came out, that when they released the second trailer, Ansel Elgort, he has a couple of his sexual allegations or his issues. He did not appear in the trailer at all. Like he
Oh,
probably got
wow.
1 second, and then like when you watch the
In
movie,
which
of
movie?
course, West Side Story, the reboot.
Oh,
Yeah,
they
Ansel
didn't
Elgort.
market him at all?
They barely did. Well,
Wow.
because the issues of him were, kind of official released post,
Okay.
editing or post, the movie filming. So uh that kind of reflected me of that is I wonder how much Amber Heard will really appear in this movie. Because that was 1 second. And it kind of reminds me of Enzel Elgort, where it's like, well, we can't really not release the movie. He has to be in it, but of like he was barely in the trailer at all. So I'm getting a little bit of same vibes. So I don't know if you guys caught that, but
Well,
I did
Ezra
catch
Miller
with
it.
and
Amber, yeah,
Ezra
But
Miller. I
yeah.
mean, the same deal with
yeah,
Ezra Miller. They
yeah,
literally could not release the movie. They had to release it with
correct.
Ezra Miller because they filmed it all.
Correct.
So,
And at least these 2 other movies, because West Side Story, I don't see much of like the male's counterpart, but more of Rachel's, who plays man, I
Rachel
forgot her name.
Zegler.
Yes.
Yeah.
We see a lot more. I believe it's more of her story. But with with at least Amber Heard, she's very much a side character. It's a little bit, I think it's a little bit easier to change around. But with Ezra Miller being the Flash, right? It's such a difficult thing to do. And it's something that you wish just never happened, because it's going to be very hard for a movie to be marketed moving forward
Yeah.
when something like that happens. So
I will say, to answer Steve's question, listen, the DCEU is a mess. I love DC characters. I've always loved them more than Marvel. Obviously, Marvel is more popular because of the movies, but I think DC has the better characters. They always had, comics wise. They're darker, they're more adult. They're a little more grounded in reality. Your
yeah,
Batman, your Superman, or sorry, not Superman. He's not reality at all. But
yeah,
one thing that makes the Nolan film so great, right? So, um, this has been a mess from the beginning. I mean, the first
yeah,
Superman movie, I'm one of the few people that really enjoys it. I think there's some really good scenes, but I also see the flaws. I see the dark tone, why it wasn't received so well, especially in the time of Marvel. The Justice League movie was rushed, where the Avengers movie was very, I mean, each character got their own movie before we got the Avengers. And
right,
then you're just kind of thrown into Justice League. So listen, DCEU's been a mess. I don't know that this is really going to be any better. I saw that report. I don't know if this is true or not. You don't know what to believe on X
absolutely,
these days, on Elon Musk's X,
yeah,
that people were walking out of test screenings. I don't know if it's true or not, but listen, I'm going to go into it with an open mind.
yep,
I'm going to go into it with very little expectation. I like that I can finally kind of go into a superhero movie and not have to worry about like what's next, because this is going to
correct,
be kind
yeah,
of the end of that. It'll be fun to see Jason Momoa in this character. For those who watched, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. What's the John Cena show on HBO?
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker, yeah,
He makes this quick cameo in that, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
yeah,
With Ezra Miller, funny enough. So, um, you know,
yeah,
Jason Momoa is built for this character. It's funny because when
yeah,
you think of Aquaman, you think of like the blonde guy
yeah, you
with
do,
the
yeah,
orange
I'm
yeah, in
costume.
so
the
That's
happy
who
they
I'm
animated
went with
feeling.
the.
series,
I'm so happy they went with
yeah,
the. I'm so happy they went with the Hawaiian kind of origin of this
Yeah,
character. Got to give
yeah,
Zack Snyder credit for that, because I think, to me, one of the things I did like was they kind of make some references in the first movie of his, I guess it's Maori descent,
Mhm.
when he invaded
Mhm.
that submarine, and he's doing the chant and all that. So I thought that was really
Yeah.
cool.
No, and listen, the first one's a lot of fun. It's cheesy at times. I'm not going to lie to you, but the final fight sequence is amazing. So I'm kind of looking forward to like all the action again. Seeing him with the
Mhm.
trident, and it looks like Manta. I'm not familiar with the trident he has, but it looks really fun. It looks like they're going to have a
Yeah.
really good battle. So I'm going to watch this movie,
Yeah.
and again, go into it with an open mind, and I'll probably enjoy it.
And Steve brought this up, but Yaya, I think, as Black Manta, I love seeing a villain return, making second
Mhm.
appearance. So I think this movie, hope if I believe it, and I really hope it does shine a lot on him. I think we're just gonna be in for a fun time, right? And I think at the end of it, that's how I believe this movie is gonna be perceived.
Yeah, and I'm curious on watching how Jason Momoa's stardom, is it enough to carry a movie to box office success? Because I think that's what
Mm.
held The Flash down. I don't think people wanted to indulge Ezra Miller.
Mm.
But Jason Momoa, it's going to be a good litmus test to see with a movie that has about a
Mhm.
$200 million budget.
Yep.
Is he going to be able to kind of overcome the
Mhm.
recent, box office flops, Blue Beetle, Shazam, The Flash? Does he have the
And,
star power to overcome that?
And to touch on that point, listen, we've seen a lot of box office flops. I think it's kind of good for cinema in a way that these big franchises are in a way flopping. While I enjoy Transformers, I understand why it flopped in the box office. I think people
Yep.
want original stories again. We have superhero fatigue. We have big franchise fatigue. Indiana Jones was another good example.
Right.
So I don't know that this is going to do well in the box office. Let's be honest, it probably won't.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see it. And I think if you go into it with that like mindset of I'm excited to see this, I don't really care what anyone else's opinion on it, then I think you'll be fine. But there are a lot of people who are influenced by that report that says people
Yeah.
walked out of the test screening.
Right.
Maybe including me, but no, I won't walk
I,
out.
I will say this, Jason Momoa. Listen, Steve is not a Fast and
Yeah.
Furious guy. Fast X, Jason Momoa is the
Hey.
villain, and I will
Yeah.
say it right now, he is
Yeah.
like the Joker of the Fast universe. He puts on a hell of a performance in an
Oh man.
otherwise, let's
Yeah.
be real, pretty bad acting movie. And even with all the
I'm
big
shocked
names.
to hear you say that, Jay.
Listen, I love
Yeah.
Fast and Furious. I'm a
Yeah.
truther, but I can also admit, listen, I
Yeah.
get it. They're corny, and he steals the show in that movie. So I
Yeah.
do think he is a big enough star to carry the box office.
Yeah. And speaking of walking out, just before we kind of end this, the only movie I ever walked out of in my life was back in 2011 or 2012, Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds. Only
Wow,
movie in
sticking
my
on the
life.
DC.
I'm so sorry. Only movie I ever walked out from the theater.
Sticking
Jay,
with the
what's
DC
yours?
slander.
What's
Oh,
yours, Jay?
it wasn't because it was bad. It was actually because I was too young and I was scared. The Ring 2. Um, I was
Okay.
terrified, and
Okay. I can
and I
totally see
was
that. Yeah.
I didn't even walk out on the girl coming out of the TV. I walked out on a moose hitting a car. It's a really dumb scene. Looking at it as an adult, I don't know why I was so scared, but I
Yeah.
was just terrified of the movie. So I actually walked out.
It's
But I
little
never
things
walked
like
out of a
that.
movie because it was bad.
Yeah.
All right, I got a few movies, two movies that I
Oh,
walked out of.
Okay.
One was actually we might have finished this, but it was horrible. The Chernobyl Diaries, really bad. If you guys
I
remember that.
it was a good movie. I liked it.
Oh my god, that movie was terrible. And then the second one, I think it's a good movie. I just was too young to. We were just me and my buddy just went to go see this movie, and I don't know. It was probably too adult for us high schoolers. Called At World's End. We were. It was like 2 weeks before we saw This Is the End, and we're like, we should watch At World's End because it looked funny. It had Simon Pegg in it, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, walked
No.
I
out
thought
of
you were
that
talking
one.
about the Pirates of the Caribbean movie for a second.
No, not at
That's
World. No,
right.
it's
No.
literally it's literally called At World's End. At the World's End,
Okay.
Okay.
and
All
it's
right.
like a comedy British movie, and yeah,
Okay.
All right, I can see why you walked out of it.
hence the Simon Pegg in it.
Okay, it's interesting. Yeah, I've never walked out of a movie because it was bad.
Yeah.
My thought is if I paid for it, I guess I might as well stick it out.
That's
But I
the
guess you could
third
also, yeah,
that's the third world dad just saying like, no, we're sticking through it. I paid for this.
yeah, that is exactly that. So yeah, I've never walked out of a movie because it was bad. Maybe this is why more people stick to streaming, because you don't have to commit to a full movie if you don't like it. So
Yeah.
there we go. All right, well, I think that puts a bow on it. We only have a few minutes left, so yeah. Obviously excited for Aquaman 2. We got a few more movies we're gonna break down, but obviously 2 more episodes of Ahsoka that we're gonna get to as well. So stick with us, follow us. We now have a Twitter, Balls Deep Cinema. We've been putting out some of our good movie takes on there, not the bad ones, of course. And we're on TikTok as well. I promise we're gonna push out some TikTok content soon. So yeah, follow us there. Stick with us. Next Tuesday will be our next episode, and we'll see you then.